Hello and welcome to another ctverses audio interview. This time I'm talking with Danny Probably, a two-piece band featuring Dan Capalbo on lead vocals and guitars, and Addie Edward on bass and drums. The song you just heard there in the intro, that song is called Suffering, and it is the band's first single. You can find it right now on Spotify. In this interview, we're going to be talking about their upcoming EP, how the band is able to achieve the sound of a four-piece as a duo. We'll talk about Disney movies and who they would get to perform as their house band if they decided to open up their own restaurant venue space in Connecticut. So this is a band that I really love and admire, so it was really a lot of fun to goof around with them. But be sure to stay tuned. At the very end of the interview, they are going to reveal the title of their EP, which is going to come out November 14th, and that is in the year 2019 for any of you time travelers out there. So I will warn you that the audio is not great in this episode, and that's my fault. We were all in separate places while we were trying to get this interview going. So we tried it initially as a three-way call. We couldn't really get that to work. So what you're going to hear is actually a recording of our group Instagram video that I recorded on my iPad's voice memo recorder. With that being said, I think it sounds pretty good. So let me know what you think, and here we go. All right, so here with me today, I have the members of Danny Probably. So on the line, I have
Dan Capalbo
and
Addie Edward.
Awesome. And we are currently in Instagram chat, which is standard for journalism. All right. So the first question that I always ask every band is, what is your favorite place in Connecticut? And I don't mean like a venue. I don't mean like, your house growing up. I just mean generally. Like, what is your favorite place in the state?
I live in Shelton, and there is a road by my house called Bird's Eye, and it's just a huge rolling farm at the top of the hill. And I will sometimes, I pass that road on the way home, and I don't have to take it, but I'll take the road just to look at it and then double back. And I feel like that's got to be my favorite spot in Connecticut. Just like lots of the rolling farm hills out here in Shelton are really gorgeous.
Gotcha. What about you, Dan?
I love Lake Wintergreen, which is, I'm going to show my lack of geography skills. I think of, West Rocks Park. And it's really beautiful. It's a wonderful place to go hike, and you just go in a loop around the lake. But I also love this time of year to go driving around my hometown of New Fairfield, because it also has nice landscapes and beautiful leaves, and there's a little turn around Squan's Pond that is lovely.
Okay,
yeah,
those are...
drive real nice this time of year too, like heading up Naugatuck, Oxford way. I feel like that's a good drive this time of year.
Is that like Highway 8?
Yeah. And it's like through this canyon. It doesn't feel, it's unique to Connecticut, I feel like, because you're like driving literally through a canyon for like 2 miles, and the foliage is just incredible, and you're literally like at the bottom of this canyon winding through. It's a really great drive.
So those are fantastic answers, but they're not the correct answer. The correct answer is never get to be cool. All right. So I'm going to start the interview with a very easy question, which is, what do you think the meaning of life is, and is that what God intended?
Dan, you can take this one first.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think about it all the time. I'll answer in reverse order. No, it wasn't God's intention, but the meaning of life is to make memes. No. I always struggle with whether or not to answer things like this with candor or in a silly flip way, because one of my, tendencies is to take things a little too seriously. So I could go down a wild rabbit hole, but lately I've been thinking really about the meaning of life, and I do think it is to participate in and enrich communities. And I don't know about God. I'm not really sure. We don't have that many conversations. I should probably ask their opinion about it at some point. But
okay, and that makes sense, kind of given your volunteer work about what you said about communities. So that's very cool. So Addie, do you agree with all these, or has your research led you to a different conclusion?
My my search, I have the same issue. Like a part of me wants to have like a really flippant, funny answer, and the college freshman philosophy student in me wants to say something else. So I'll get both. It's either to find acceptance and peace within yourself through connection with others, or to argue over what the best New Haven pizza is, which is Pepe, clearly.
Which is modern.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, shoot. Oh no.
We're defecting within the first 30 minutes of the Actually, I don't want to derail us, but it is modern. No. I guess it's relevant to some of the topics that we write songs about. But if I'm being totally honest, and I'm not being silly or self-conscious at all, there is this kind of like Jungian notion that achieving the true personality is one way to godliness, and that like a person should feel as devoutly committed to their own truth as like a religious person would be to their particular deity. And I really actually do think that is probably my answer, is to like be yourself.
Okay. Yeah, so I was gonna say, like, to simplify it for today's youth, you're saying, so Danny probably is saying that the meaning of life is to live your best life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your best life, truest to the only thing you can really know completely, which is yourself.
Okay.
I mean, not to speak for you, Dan. I mean,
no, and I accept what you said about Pepe's because I respect you.
Okay.
You
They're all delicious.
wait, so you accept it, but you don't like, you know.
I don't co-sign.
New Haven pizza is the Yoko Ono of Danny Probably. It's kind of
I'm wondering now if I should ask, like, begin all these interviews like asking about New Haven style pizza.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to have some arguing, it's a great way to go, I bet. Definitely some drama.
Fired up.
So I actually don't know all that much about your origin story. And so I'm kind of curious about that. It seems to me that before the band was together, that you both were kind of like separately kind of like established musicians in the scene, right? And so what brought you together?
Well, I personally feel a lot less established because Dan was doing Quiet Giant and Rockin' and a Rollin' and had many records under her belt, and like was touring and had built a name. And I was making music in my basement until this last year when we connected through Instagram, because she was working on a record and putting some songs together. And I had just started becoming more active, trying to make connections in music because I was tired of playing by myself. And so I think she saw some of my posts and videos and was like, hey, do you want to throw some drums on some recordings? And that was that, I think.
I really like listening to Addie tell this story because I think my version would be a little more convoluted but less accurate. Like that to me is how it happened. But I also would say that I might have been playing out more, but I actually considered and still do consider Addie to be a more established musician in the sense that he's so talented and creative and technically proficient, I would say. And yeah, I had seen his videos and we had chatted about music, and Quiet Giant had just ended. I stepped away from music completely and didn't think I would really ever do it again in terms of like live performance or anything like that. And Addie had asked me if we could get together and do tunes, and like the time wasn't right because I was really going through it in my own way. And then when I had put together basically a full-length record, my vision at the time was never to play live, but actually to have a different drummer on every track of the record. And I had reached out to a number of people, some of whom actually did come in and track. So there is like a full-length record that hasn't been released, and that's like probably pretty close to being done. But at a certain point, Addie was just the person who like kept showing up enthusiastically and eagerly. And the songs were, for me, a little bit different. And it seemed, actually, even like the sound engineer I was working with, he would look at me during Addie's tracking sessions and be like, he really listened to the song. Like, he really knows what he's doing. And once the scales had tipped and Addie had recorded the drums for like 5 or so of the songs, probably in like one session, to be honest, I just felt like, wow, this is someone who really likes the music and gets it. And I guess from there, I probably asked, you know, would you want to be my bandmate? Would that be okay with you? Because it's a different level of commitment, like being a studio drummer versus being in the project. And I'm really grateful that he said yes.
Yeah, enthusiastically so. I think we make a really good team because Dan is such a natural songwriter, like a machine, but not mechanical, but like it just flows out of her, and she'll have like a new tune when we get together to rehearse or record. And I will enthusiastically be like, yeah, let's go on a tangent and work on it, because I really, really like all the songs she writes. And that's where I feel like I can help, is just do some arranging and use some multi-instrumentation kind of stuff to like help build the song. And then the pressure's off of me, because I feel like, I mean, you know, there's like the whole hate what you create kind of thing. And I just get to enthusiastically love the songs we're working on, because I don't have all that self-criticism about it, and then we get to build it together, and it's been a lot of fun.
So and in just a minute, I want to ask you a little bit about what you're recording now. But Dan, you were saying that you basically have almost an entire album that is, you know, like, I feel like whenever you said that, I was like, you know, you just dropped it so casually that I'm kind of curious. Like, would you consider that a Danny Probably album, or is that more like a solo type thing?
Well, I consider it a Danny Probably album because such a large proportion of the record is a collaboration between me and Addie. But really, like, okay, so as a little bit of quick background, there is a wonderful friend of mine that I've worked with since the first days of Quiet Giant named Tom Bonehead, and he's really modest, humble, and prefers to kind of fly under the radar as far as his recording studio goes. But he became a dear friend of mine, and we had made an EP where I had tracked everything, and that was like a Danny Probably record, but I made it when I was in Quiet Giant, and I didn't really promote it heavily. And so when I returned to making music and recording, I feel like it's a Danny Probably record because I made it with Tom, and Tom brings something really, I don't know, inimitable to the work that I feel like I make. It's got like a good energy, and he's such a mentor to me. But the only reason that I feel we haven't actually released the record is because it's not a Danny Probably album, in the sense that, like, we haven't played those songs together. So maybe one of them. I think we do Reality. And yeah, that might be the only record. Is that right, Addie? I think that's the only song on the record.
There's Big Other too, but I think that was so early on in our collaboration that I think our sound and your songs that we play now have changed significantly in tone and just in genre a little bit, kind of moved away from those songs. Do feel a little more like they were written for Quiet Giant, like when you had that you know, collection of people in mind to develop those songs. And then since we've been working together, it's kind of, you know, shifted a little bit. But yeah, Reality, which we were talking about releasing.
I think we should do that. Yeah. You know, what's kind of cool, so that record, I have a lot of thoughts about that collection of songs, and I don't want to belabor it because it's not what we're currently working on. But, like, first of all, it was a tremendous amount of work, and Tom really put his heart and soul into it. And, you know, so did I, and so did Addie. And Jared from Quiet Giant tracked drums on one of the songs. But there are, like, 3 or 4 songs on that record that I genuinely love that I hope one day I can compile and release. I think that they came from a really true and honest place, because I was totally disconnected from the music community in a way when I made it. I just was like making songs, but I would describe it as like a very, very high quality, not a demo. That feels like it's like selling it short, but it was like a proof of point. And then, yeah, we've kind of taken some of those songs in a different direction. The one song that we released from that actually was Kids in the Hall.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Suffering.
Suffering,
Is
yeah.
current title, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that's that. That's the tea on that project. But honestly, like, there's one or two of those songs that I still listen to, and it feels like a little secret that I have. Like, not many people have heard them, but the song that Jared drummed on is it might be one of my favorite songs I've written. So
That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
thanks for asking.
That it seems like, you know, Danny probably did start kind of like a solo project and has kind of morphed into something that's much more democratic, right? And Addie, you even like kind of referred to this about how the band is now changed almost genres over time, you know? Do you like, how has that changed? Like, what do you think Addie's influence is now that you guys are kind of, because I feel like y'all have like a really awesome chemistry that play off each other, at least live that I've seen. And so how do you think that manifests in the writing?
What do you think, Dan? You're writing it.
Goodness. Well, I think Addie has pushed me to up my approach completely. Like, there's a level of excitement and enthusiasm that Addie demonstrates that is so refreshing and also really authentic. So I don't really know, I feel like I don't know a lot of people that are just like so purely grateful and excited and motivated to play music. I think it's partly maybe because, Addie, you weren't playing live a lot and you weren't in other projects, so it felt like this was this pristine new territory of like, oh, I'm part of the music community now, and I personally feel like I benefited tremendously from that. But like, Addie is a remarkable musician, and so for me, songs, like, I write a lot of songs. I write songs every day, not like intentionally. I just really like to do it, and I normally would like write a song and be like, all right, that song's done, I'm going to do that. And Addie helps me realize, okay, we're going to flesh that out and like arrange it. And we're going to give that song maybe a little bit more personality and take more time. So I think that it's been like a creative contribution, a morale contribution, arguably the most like supportive and kind person I know. And also Addie is a like natural born problem solver. And I think that really comes through in the songs too, because I know when a song I've written is partly there, but not all the way there. And it's really nice to have someone to turn to whose, tastes and interests are like aligned with mine, but then also like transcend mine in some ways. And to be able to say like, how do we solve the problem of this bridge? Or what, do you think that sounds right? Or
yeah, I think first of all, thank you. Those were all very kind words. And
they're true.
I think, like, maybe the something you've mentioned a lot is like going from the Quiet Giant stuff and even like that early Danny Probably stuff you wrote that was maybe more like alt rock. You've been like, is this too poppy? And I've been like, I love pop music. I love accessible stuff that's like earworms and memorable melodies and catchy rhythms. And I love kind of eclectic, eccentric music. We both do. Like, I mean, I'm diehard Animal Collective, even like their weird, stuff. But the music that resonates with me is stuff that I can connect to quickly. Like, I don't listen to the radio a lot, but I know that like I appreciate that formula for like radio music that just grabs you immediately. And it feels very insincere and artificial, when they just use that formula in radio music. But if you apply that to sincere, well-written songs like the ones Dan writes, then you can have something really special, I think. And so I've enjoyed just kind of like, if she's like, is this too poppy or whatever? I'm like, hell no, like, let's run with this and just like make a nice pop country song like here and there. Like I feel like the range of stuff we do is like, and that's something that's coming out on this EP. Like, you brought us, this EP is a month away from release, and you brought in a song, and I was like, we have this many songs. This one's fairly simple, and I think it'll help demonstrate our range. And so we have like this country down home kind of low key song that's going to end up in the middle of this. And it's going to go from that to like a rip and roll and rock and roll jam. So I do think our skills complement each other well. Like, you're a natural songwriter, an incredible vocalist, and a great guitarist. And I like taking the songs you've written and working with you on them to develop into, fully fleshed out stuff. So yeah, I agree with everything you said, and it's just been a blast making music.
I feel like this is such a turnaround compared to the pizza debate that we were having just a couple of minutes ago.
I mean, I'll never forget those words.
Sure, yeah. Pizza will tear us apart, but music brings us together, for sure.
It's true.
But that's interesting what you were saying, Addie, because like whenever I think about your solo music, I haven't thought about it, but it is pop music. It is like it is pure pop music, but it's pop like sideways. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like very eclectic and very kind of almost anything goes, like anything's possible, but it's all about the melody and all about the grooves and getting that good earworm.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I've been really inspired by bands like Animal Collective, who also show that range of like being super weird and avant-garde, but then they'll have Merriweather Post Pavilion or Painting With, two records that like have super catchy songs, but also have like an eclectic timbre and arrangement and palette of instruments and sounds that like take what works really well, like verse, chorus, bridge, like really standard stuff with catchy melodies, but if you choose your instrumentation differently and like add different textures or do something a little different with the arrangement, you can take that standard formula of just like have great melodies and great beats and great tones overall of your music and just do something a little different, like use some different colors, and then all of a sudden, like what's the name of the fucking band? Perfume Genius, I think, does this really well too.
Oh, yeah.
Like he's writing pop music, but it feels fresh and new and but still accessible and like very familiar. So I think that's what we're trying to do with the music we're making.
Okay. And so I have a couple of questions that I was going to talk about, but I'm so curious to hear about the new stuff that I'm going to save those things for later. So what can you tell me about? All right. So you told me a little bit about the new EP that is coming out in about a month.
14th, I think, or
November
something.
14th. Okay.
That's the release show with Fiction Kids at the State House, right? Am I talking out of turn here?
No.
No, that's right. It's a Thursday night, and I only know that because I had to get coverage for work.
Oh, yikes.
Otherwise, I'd be like, it's probably on a Saturday, guys. But yes, that's going to be, I think, the formal release date. As you can tell, we've really planned this all out. Gotten all of concerts. The truth is, like, we actually have planned so much, but we're making the record ourselves. So for me, details that feel a little frivolous are like the actual date we release it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like when it actually comes out.
Right. We're still concerned with like guitars and vocals and finding time to record all those things.
Yeah.
What's coming together?
Yeah. So how many songs do you plan on having for the EP?
6.
Okay. You said that very confidently, like that's predetermined.
Yeah, we did Friday officially, so.
Okay.
It was 5 until, I think, looking at it, we both kind of felt like the flow of it. We want this EP to be a collection of some of our favorite tunes that we like to play, but also, I think, flow like a mini album. It's like a collection of unified songs, and I think in the middle it felt like there was room for bringing the record down a little further in terms of energy and kind of really just mellowing out for a middle track. And so we literally were like, okay, what song could fit there? And she pulled out a song that I had heard her play. I think she sent me a video of it. But it's like very brand new, and it seemed to fit just right. So that's the 6th song that was added as of Friday.
Is that the country song?
Yeah.
Cool.
The way I described this song, I think I described it, Addie, to you like this, and I also described it to my mom like this, is that it's Danny Probably's version of that Sheryl Crow Kid Rock song, like, I took put your picture.
Right. Yeah, cruising together. Yeah, and it also feels like, is it Sarah McLaughlin or whatever? Landslide, is that her?
Sarah McLaughlin.
Is that Sarah McLaughlin?
I think it's Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
Is it? Oh, shit. Oh, cut that out.
Wow. Keep that. Please keep it. I beg you.
You can leave that in.
That's going to be the headline.
That's our landslide, yeah. It's our landslide / cruising with Kid Rock. Maybe let's go more the Fleetwood Mac direction than the Kid Rock.
Yeah, I want to be very clear that I don't co-sign Kid Rock. It's more that
she disagrees with his politics, but she loves his music. She's blasted Kid Rock all day long.
Yep, I can't lie. No, I don't know why that song came up for me, but there's something, because I wrote this country song. I've been writing a lot of country songs. I don't know why. I do know why, but that's a conversation for a different time. But I wrote this country song, and then Addie was like, oh, what should we do? And I was like, well, I think Addie said it should just be you and a guitar. And I was like, how about if it's you singing part of it too? And it's like, I don't know. Actually, I think it's got a really strong melody, and it makes me feel emotional when I hear it, even though it has no application to my life at all. And I don't know, I hope that Sheryl Crow and Kid Rock cover it one day.
One day.
So what was your decision to go with this as like a purely DIY, like do-it-yourself recording process?
Money. No.
Yeah. That's completely legitimate, though.
Into that. Dan's expressed how much he's enjoyed this process just for the complete freedom there is. I started recording at home when I was 16 or something, so I've been doing this for like 13 years or something like that. Is my math off? Oh my god, it's been longer. Oh my god, it's been like 15 years. And so over the years, I've just amassed enough equipment and enough trial and error know-how to get a decent, maybe a little more than decent sounding recording. And I've got like my own little tricks that probably a pro would look at me and like roll their eyes, but we have the ability to do it, and financially it's a great way to go. I think we've just mostly enjoyed like being in a comfortable space where like it's literally just our two voices that have any say over how things go. And like we've talked about getting a bassist kind of thing, which we both see the value of having a dedicated bassist, but it's also another voice in the mix that's going to have an opinion, which is fine. And we're both pretty democratic, amicable people who can, appreciate other opinions, but we also really like the 50-50 split, I think, of just like really developing our sound and having a good back and forth between just the two of us. So doing the DIY thing has just been nature, I think, coming out of that sort of appreciation of just our liking just having our two voices in the mix and getting the sound we want and developing the songs the way we want to develop them.
And it makes load out a lot easier.
Yeah.
Except that I'm the bassist and the drummer, so I feel like I have all the gear. After every show, I'm like, look, I'm never actually mad, Dan. I want you to know I'm never actually upset. But I packs up her pedal board, her guitar, and then waltzes on out, and I'm collapsing all the drum stuff and taking out the bass amp, and so
I will be your roadie. I'm okay with that. Honestly, the tendonitis is really flaring up. I don't know if I can.
I know. In the pain.
No, I'm just joking. I think I said money, but I'm only partly kidding. Like that's definitely that's a conversation worth having when it comes to like being a person that has a job and wants to make things. But it's really fun to see how Addie interprets the songs, because my past experience, I love working in a studio, and I've been really lucky because I've worked with such cool, down to earth sound engineers who have become my friends. And I think they work a kind of magic, and they know things that I simply don't know. But there's less of like a producer role that they're playing. They're mixing, but it's typically like we're going to sit down and mix together. I'm looking forward to when Addie and I mix the record in a final stage, but it's really neat because Addie has brought a producer's mind to the record, and he has like a great attention to detail that I think eludes me a lot of the time. Like I am like, okay, I got this melody, I've got this idea, the song's good, this is great. So it's fun to just be in that world where the two of us are taking an idea and then I don't know, bringing it to life. Also, Addie has chickens at his house.
And ducks. Chickens and ducks.
Are they featured on the EP?
They should be.
We should find a way, yeah. I'll go out and get some samples of them quacking away in the garden. They're great. I was thinking about production name, put some sort of name on this quote-unquote studio. I don't know, the Coop? That's kind of
That's good.
Cool.
That's good.
That's good.
Record together, and I think I was maybe speaking a lot more for myself. I like having control of the sound. Because I am not a very confrontational person. I am not one who's gonna, if I have a strong opinion about how something sounds, a lot of times will be like, oh, well, that's good enough, and I don't need to chime in here. So I like having less voices to contend with because I don't like to contend with other voices very much. So I like being like, oh, what do you think about doing this? And she'll be like, that's good. Or she'll be like, well, what about this? And I'll be like, that's actually a great idea. And it's just so much less confrontation, not like actual confrontation, so much less like even mild disagreement makes me uncomfortable sometimes.
Honestly, we've saved a lot of money. We only needed to purchase 2 sets of boxing gloves. And I think it's a great economy. It's a great value.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So you were talking a little bit about loading up the bass amp, and so you're playing drums and you're mouthing the bass part. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm kind of humming the bass line.
Gotcha.
I have this awesome piece of equipment called a Digitech Vocalist Workstation from the year 2000, so the distant future. And it's got, I bought it years ago because it like works as a harmonizer, so basically like a vocoder, which I've used on like my own recordings here and there. And then I personally was missing the low frequency. Like we played a good number of shows, just guitar and drums, and it was a lot of fun, and it sounded great still. But I love that low end sound, and I really think it totally fleshes out and adds so much to a group. And so I was like, I wonder if this would work. Like on a lark, I thought about putting my vocal through something that'll drop it an octave, and if I could hum through a bass amp while playing, it might kind of work. And it kind of did, and I was excited about it. And at first, I didn't know if she was on board with it. I kept being like, look, if you don't like this, just tell me. Because I also know that Dan can be pretty non-confrontational and just kind of go with the flow. And if she doesn't like something, sometimes she'll let things slide if she likes the person enough. So I was like, are you okay with me doing this? And like humming the bass line while playing drums, and she said yes, so I've been continuing to do that. And I think it does add, it really fills out the sound, and people have come up a lot after being like, you guys sound really full for a 2-piece. And I'm like, well, that's what we're shooting for. Like sound, we want a complete fleshed out sound for the songs. So
yeah, and so I was kind of interested in how you mentioned the possibility of like a bass player in the band, and the reason why is because like when I listen to your music, it feels very much developed for your specific lineup. And what I mean by that is that, like, so for example, Dan uses this loop pedal board so that you can achieve kind of a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar. And so yes, you have the sound of like a 4-piece or even a 5-piece band coming out of 2 people. But to me, that has never felt like crutch isn't the word that I'm looking for. It has never felt like a constraint. It never has felt like we can only do this sound, as a two-piece. It feels more like look at how big our sound can be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, Dan was doing. I saw her play a show at Cafe 9 a little over a year ago because I was just about to go in and track drums for those recordings, and she was playing and rocking the loop pedal, which I knew she used, and constructing these really layered songs. I think Suffering, the single out there, is a great example of that. I saw her play that, and Big Other, another one of the tunes that heavily uses the looper. And she's the only one up there, but she's building this elaborate arrangement of different sounds. So it's always continually moving forward and building and building. And yeah, so she had her own essentially rhythm section, even though it was all guitars already. And I think both like to see how much sound we can make individually.
Right.
We both like to we like big sounding things. And so between the two of us kind of doing that and kind of multitasking, yeah, we can get a pretty expansive sound out of things. So
I feel like whenever I listen to your music, and I'm specifically talking about the guitar loops and stuff like that, is that a lot of people, whenever they have the loop, it's because they're solo. And it's almost I'm going to use the loop because I'm playing solo. And whenever I hear you play it, it sounds more like this is one piece of the sound that I'm making, not I'm using this because it's solo. And I guess what I mean by that is that if you look at almost any other artist who is using a loop pedal, it always starts really slow and it builds up as they start looping these things together. But with your music, it's kind of it never feels like I'm waiting for it to build up. It always feels all right, from the get-go, we're engaged, we're involved, the audience is involved in the song, and we almost don't even realize how much it's building until, midway through the song, whenever you realize how much is going on. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, I think
that's moving to me. That means a lot to me. That's really cool. I think when I write a melody, I didn't always have a looper. I got a looper right after Quiet Giant ended. And it was also the same time that I did not want to play music anymore or be involved in music anymore. And it was sitting in the corner of the room. And at a certain point, I was so overwhelmed with work and other things in life, I would go in there, into the room, and started to reacquaint myself with music just by having play time with it, having it be a very low pressure escape from stress as opposed to being a source of stress and pressure.
Right.
And I never thought, okay, I want to do something clever or I want to do something especially tricky that's going to be impressive and cool. I just hear melody a lot in my mind all day. I don't know if it's maybe some sort of a mental issue. I'm not being flip, I'm being honest. And so I was like, oh, this is a really cool way for me to have fun exercising some of these little melodies I hear. So for me, when I build a loop or when I build a song, it's never really very planful, which I can admit I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not a very technically proficient musician, but I want people to hear all of the melody for the most part up front because I'm that's the thing I hear. Let's get everyone into it right away.
Right.
And then over time, I feel like over the course of a song, bringing in little things. And, Addie and I were talking about this recently. I don't really shred. My brother in Quiet Giant shredded. There were times in the studio when Jared would be like, all right, Brian May, let's just arrange it. My brother lives to shred and he does it incredibly well. I don't have that technical savvy, but I really love melodies, and I think that there's a lot of emotion that can come from a whole note or from the same note being struck again and again. So I think it's more of a natural tendency of mine to just be okay, let's build something that's a little quirky and weird, but then throw just one note over the top, and somehow that one note is going to bring out a kind of dynamic that I didn't necessarily realize was there. And almost actually the group is the two songs that we loop with, Big Other and Suffering. I did not set out to create those loops at all. They were totally accidental and just a byproduct of me wanting to feel something myself. And then I was like, oh, it's really pretty. Let's just do it. But I really appreciate that. And the looping sometimes is a lot of stress because I mean, like at some point, Addie, I will level up. I want to get to Addie's level. There are artists that like, okay, so I think of Olive Tiger and I think of Evelyn Gray. Olive Tiger as a band has in-ears that they use, so all of them hear the loop on a click, which is highly effective. I don't know if I think that they would.
Very helpful.
And Evelyn has a system where she's basically quantizing the loops so that once the loop goes into the pedal, there's like a MIDI. I don't know what I'm talking about, but all I know is that she was like, you know, it's syncing everything up. I am just going by my natural sense of rhythm, and thank goodness that Addie is such a good
the loop thing. Yeah, I agree. It's all can be so frightening. I think of it as like it's a moving train. Like there's no stopping the loop once it's going.
Yeah.
And oh boy, we've played a couple shows like this one song Big Other, which kind of puts the fear in us a little bit when we talk about playing it live, because it is loop based and it is just that rolling train. And if you get off on the wrong stop accidentally, all of a sudden it like can be a disaster for a second. You have to self-correct mid-song, and everybody notices when that happens. Like it's hard, you know, even like an untrained ear, a non-musician is going to be like, "Ooh, things are kind of falling apart." You can see they don't know why, but they notice it. So they can be a little intimidating, definitely, to like play a loop tune. And I think it limits. One of the things I love about looping is that you can create this layered big sound that you can't do without a looper. And one of the things I really dislike about it is how it can be confining when you're playing, because you know, it's not like you have a 5-piece band where everyone's kind of flexible with their time a little, but everyone can adjust on the fly. You're really tied into this looper, and it can take away some spontaneity and all that stuff. So there's definitely a trade-off with using the loops, but I think overall we've had a lot of fun doing it, and are working towards trying to like dealing with like in-ears. For now, we have her guitar amp basically faces me,
right,
so I can hear them really clearly, and then we have a line out going to the PA so that it goes through, but just so that I can stay locked in. And
I wonder what Ports of Spain use, because I know that like they use a lot of loops as well in their compositions. One thing that I'm fascinated by with bands is their bios that they include in like their promos. And so what I mean by that is like, you know, like you're on Facebook and you look at like a gig and, you know, it'll have like these copy and pasted, you know, promos on there. And so yours says, let's see, it says Danny Probably is a 2-piece, 4-piece from New Haven, Connecticut that makes pop music from the picked up pieces of dreams, television shows, books they've read, and feelings they've had. And I'm just wondering if you can tell me a little bit more about that, like about this idea that it almost feels like that sort of makes it sound like a stream of consciousness kind of way that you gather influences.
I do feel responsible for this. I think that I
wrote it.
I wrote it. I don't remember when I wrote it, but I do remember that I wrote it because someone needed it, and I took it upon myself. So, Addie, if we need to change it, I'm open to that. I'll make a Google Doc.
I like that bio. Well, yeah, I generally like it. I think we have a shared affinity for like certain pop culture. Like we both love classic Disney, like animated Disney films from, you know, the as early as Snow White, which is personally not my favorite, but you know, we Little Mermaid, like we did a Little Mermaid cover of Part of Your World that we just like that night when we decided to do it, we dove so hard into it and spent a whole rehearsal just working on that because we were both so in love with Disney. Like we love the Disney. We're shills for like corporate Disney. Like I'm fine that Disney is buying everything.
For yourself. No, I'm kidding. No, that is actually a really bizarre thing that we do have in common, because I think it's at odds in a way with the rest of our personalities.
Sure.
It's true.
Yeah, Disney is about as far away from DIY as you can get, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, for real. It is like, you can't get more corporate than that. I mean, it's Disney, Amazon, Apple, Google, but I will forever, like, only partly apologize for my love of everything Disney.
I'll rationalize.
Disney's one of those.
I'll rationalize my love of Disney.
Rationalize, that's good.
Yeah.
I think Disney is something that gets you so young, like I couldn't walk and I was watching Disney animated films, and I think that's the kind of stuff, being a creature of nostalgia like myself, and I think Dan is too, like, that really shaped us, creatively and emotionally, and things that resonate with us. I mean, it's just pretty closely tied into our childhoods, which is where I think a lot of songwriting is born. Like, sincere songwriting, I think, comes a lot out of your development as a child, and kind of like trying to like suss out these nostalgic emotions and put them into words and into melodies. And I think, like, that's a pretty big one for the two of us, like, in terms of like dreams and culture that we've both kind of absorbed.
If there is like anything to know about my general approach to making art, I have like I'm very, very, very influenced by Carl Jung, and it's a borderline obsessive relationship that I have with his work. And I guess it might just be my nature, and this is why I like his work so much. My nature is to try to let my unconscious steer the ship as much as possible. And there is a very sort of free form, free flow aspect to writing the songs themselves. So I can comfortably say this now, I never sit down and say, I'm going to do an A chord and a D chord and a C chord. That would probably sound like shit. I don't even know. I can't even imagine, I talk to myself a lot. And the way I talk to myself is usually like in a sing-song way. It's like I treat myself like a child. I think a lot and I talk to myself a lot. So I will be doing the dishes or driving the car or pacing around my house and saying things to myself. And then I'll realize, like, oh, that thing I just saying out loud to myself is maybe the start of something. And it's not until after I've gotten to a certain point in the melody, because I don't even think of it as a song. It's like I'll sing a melody and the melody will shift a few times. So the first shift is like usually the pre-chorus, the second shift is the chorus. And after I've gotten a little bit of it down, I'll think, oh, I know where that idea came from. In some cases, I'm like, that idea totally came from Breaking Bad, or that idea came from, like, Big Other is about a philosophy by a French psychologist called Jacques Lacan. Like, it's all this stuff that if I talked about it, it would sound really lame and pretentious.
No way.
But,
no way. Because our listeners.
Talk about it.
No, I was gonna say our listeners better know Lacan, and if they don't, they can go listen to CT Scramble.
Yeah. But it's like, in some cases I'm really ripping it, like Unified Theory. We have a song on the new record that we play out all the time called Unified Theory, and it really is just about physics. Like, it's just about that. It's not some bigger, that's a pretty big and deep topic, I guess. But so it's like these things that I don't really sit down and I'm like, I'm going to write a concept song about different. It's more free flow. So when we're asked to write a bio, it can be kind of daunting because I'm like, I don't know. I literally don't know what I'm singing about until after it's done. But the one thing I would say is there's this phenomenal Stephen King book. It's his writing memoir. It's called On Writing.
Oh, yeah.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, it's great. Never use adverbs.
Never do it. I had only read that book, and I would tell people, oh, I love Stephen King. And they were like, oh, have you read it? I was like, no, I literally read the memoir. Does that count? I don't know if that counts.
Yeah, it definitely counts. That book is great.
It's great. And something he says in that book that I find really striking is that, one of his tips is like write with the door closed, edit with the door open. And what he's kind of getting at is this notion that you start writing without applying a ton of pressure and structure to yourself. And when that process is at a certain point down the line, that's when he starts to recognize, like, he'll go through a draft 8 weeks after he's written it, and he'll say, oh, there's themes in here that are emerging that I did not even realize were present. And then you can go in and you can amplify the theme intentionally. But my vibe is, I don't like to go into something intentionally. I like to let the intention reveal itself. And so that's probably what happened with the bio too. That's probably why it's so shitty. I should have just made an outline. I should have asked Addie to write it.
I think that's a good analogy for how we make music too. I think you are kind of the author with the door closed, and then you bring it in here and we kind of co-edit together. And it's just a very, it's a pretty smooth process. I don't think there have really been any hiccups in it.
Jump cut to the montage of us just screaming at each other. It's a smooth process of me throwing down the bookshelf and you're... I'm joking. It's a delight to work with Addie.
So I'm going to shift to a really serious question, which is, this is specifically for Addie, actually, but Dan, feel free to chime in. Are the legends true that you draw your power from the hoodie and hat that you wear when you perform?
Oh my God, the hoodie and the hat. That's probably, actually I have a real answer to this. I like kind of eccentric, flamboyant clothes for performing. Like, I generally shop in the women's section at Goodwill to find like these really ornate, like cool, like, I mean, you don't find that stuff, unfortunately, and that's one of the problems personally. I, as just talking about how unaffected I am by any of the sort of gender problems out there of like people not recognizing any sort of spectrum and just keeping it super binary, is like, for me, the only problem I come across, just bearing my privilege here, is that men's clothes are super fucking boring, generally, I find. And so I love just like going through the rack and finding all these like really great clothes with like cool ornate stuff on it. So I found like this sparkly hoodie and just these like really sweet, like deep neck kind of things. And I find it's like me donning some sort of performance outfit, because I don't know, it helps me kind of get in the zone when performing, to like put on a character of sorts. And like, that's not the kind of stuff I generally wear day to day, except actually I do. So now I'm kind of talking out of my ass. I don't really know what I'm saying. But
your style is impeccable.
Do you know what I'm saying, though?
I do know what you're saying.
And I always feel like maybe this is stuff that we should cut out, because like I'm always nervous about stepping on any landmines as a privileged cisgender white male when talking about how I'm wearing like quote unquote women's clothes when I'm performing, and it helps me get in the space. I'm 100% an ally and 100% just supportive of everyone anywhere. I just want that to be clear when
I want to
talk about this sort of stuff.
This might not be, who knows if this will be in the final thing, but one thing I want to say is that Addie is a really like refreshing person, because it's almost, I've never said this to you, Addie, so this is obviously the best possible time to say it, but it's almost like this blast from the past kind of quality, where you're just unfazed, unaffected by what I feel are some of the hang-ups that people tend to have about like how they present themselves and how they express themselves. Like, you're just a very earnest, authentic person. And one time we were at a show and Addie had on this great blouse, and someone came up and was like, I love that shirt, and you just answered very honestly, and you were like, oh, thank you so much, I got this in the plus size women's section at Walmart. And people like laughed, and you were like, no, I really did, like, I really got it there, like, that this is what I wanted to wear. And I can say, as someone who presents as a woman in this world, that it's really nice to see you not give a single fuck because I'm a little bit on the flip side. Like, I don't really put a lot of effort into how I present myself to the world. It's not my high priority. But I do think that you are deriving your powers low-key from the hat and the hoodie, in the sense that you just show up as yourself, and you're really good at it. And you've made me think, it might sound silly and trivial, but you've made me think I don't have to, like, shop from the section that's for me in the store, in, like, a literal and a figurative sense. Like, if I like a thing, I can just do that thing. So I think it's empowering, personally.
I'm hoping so. That's what I always think, like, coming from where I am as an individual, I hope it's a way that I can just lend a hand in sort of blurring gender lines. Like, I'm a cis male, white dude, but, like, who gives a fuck if I'm wearing women's clothes? Like, who gives a fuck? Like,
I agree.
That's I think, one of the, like, I really am just dressing the way I like to look. I like wearing these clothes, and I like how I look in them and how I feel in them. And I just think that it could be a way to sort of, like, I think I have a pretty strong,
fashion sense.
Sure, fashion sense.
I do just want to recap. So we've got Kid Rock, we've got Disney. And I think we're doing great. Honestly, I think that we're a band that the masses would appreciate.
Yes.
Here's hoping.
There's lots of on the Venn diagram of things, lots of Kid Rock fans who also like modern New Haven style pizza, who also like Little Mermaid. I think there's a lot of crossover.
There's a lot of crossover.
For sure.
If you like Kids in the Hall, you might like us.
Yeah.
If you like... No, that's probably not true. Kids in the Hall are smarter than I am, but we love them.
That we do.
Okay, so I have this is a multi-part question, and so I want you to use your imaginations together. Let's say that you're going to open up a Danny Probably venue, and so it can be in any part of the state. I don't want you to worry about any kind of competition or stepping on anybody's toes or anything like that. And so I want you to think, would this be a restaurant? Would it be a coffee shop? Would it be a bar, tavern, what have you? Who is the house band that plays on Friday nights? And then the final part, what kind of, I don't know. I should have thought of this. What kind of appetizers do they have? I had the first two. I didn't know what I was going to ask for the third part. So what kind of appetizers do you serve?
Addie, is it okay with you if I answer? Well, actually, I should ask you. Because this is the coolest question. I want to ask everyone I know. I want to ask you this question, ctverses. My initial thought is, like, it is definitely a restaurant, in my view. And, like, the main function is that it's a restaurant where we cook with Whole Foods, not the grocery store, but, like, Whole Foods, and most importantly, like, I know that I alone and Addie alone, like, we don't probably have, like, the qualifications to make it, like, the most banging-ass restaurant. So it's, like, I would hit up, like, Farmers, but it would just be, like, a place where you can come get a really good meal, and ideally the kind of place where, like, if I was a patron, I could pay for my meal, but I could also leave extra money so that someone else could come in and have a meal. But it would be, like, a restaurant, and there would be community offerings, like trainings, and that would probably be, like, the main gist of it. And there would just be, like, sick music. Like, I would borrow from the State House ethos because I think that they just have, like, the best local music. But as far as, okay, we'll get to appetizers. But what do you think for a house band, Addie?
I mean, I don't want to come off as pandering to ctverses right now. But I have been jamming on that new Crag Mask record. Bending the shit out of it because it fucking rules. I was so bummed that I didn't go last night to see them at the church, but and I was also thinking before, Dan, you were talking about how you write songs, and you're like, I'm not just saying I'll do an A chord and a D chord and a C chord. And in my head, I played those through, and I'm like, Crack Mask would do that. That would be a progression they would utilize, I'm pretty sure. But I
kind of want to play it. I couldn't hear it, but that sounds righteous. If you think Crack Mask would do it, then we're going to do it too.
They would, and that would be my choice for house band right now, because probably just because that's what I'm really, really jamming on. That or Pearl Sugar.
Yes. Oh my God, what a good house band.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, before we get to the appetizer question, which to me is like actually the most important.
Not just.
I'm totally down with Crag Mask and Pearl Shook BB for house band. But my mom and my dad are both in bands, and I would want them to have a crack at it. You know, my dad is a banjo player in a really good bluegrass band that literally played Cafe 9, and I like dragged everyone I knew to go see it because I was so excited. So I'd like let my dad all right, like, I know this is like defeating the purpose of a house band, but I would love at least we would book them. They wouldn't be the house band. We would book them because the banjo, I love you, Dad, but it gets a little bit much. My mom is like in a really sick band. They do all covers. And there's a part of me that thinks a house band should in some way be a little bit of a cover band, you know? Because you're pleasing the people. I grew up in a family, like my family was a band when I was growing up. And that's all they did was play covers. So I'm like, I feel like it would have to be, we would make Crag Mask do covers.
I like that. I was going to say, I was thinking of like, well, wait, who would actually, like, what band would be like a really versatile, not that Crag Mask and Pearl Sugar aren't like versatile, you know, musicians, but they definitely have a very unique sound to them. I was thinking about a band that could do like lots of different covers, you know, and things like that, and really kind of emulate the artist they're covering. I would go with Fat Astronaut. Or I think groups like that, or Greetings. I really dig Greetings. Really anything Chad does is like, I mean, he's an unreal vocalist, and whatever band he's working with sounds kick-ass. So I think I would go for Astronaut as fan
Now, let's talk about the appetizer really quickly. I think it would have to just be like a simple, nice appetizer that was gluten-free. I'm not being funny. I just think like something that like anyone could eat.
Anyone can eat. French fries. Like, there's this bar in Shelley.
That's gluten-free.
That are, they have pommes frites, right? So fancy French fries, but they are like the same thing at a fucking, what's the place in New Haven with the great fries and like tons of sauces. On the corner.
I don't know.
Rudy's.
Rudy.
They have like great French fries with like 20 different sauces. And if you have like a really good, crispy, like well seasoned fry with like lots of different sauce options, then I'm down to clown.
Maybe the appetizer would just be like a sauce bar, and you would be able to choose if you wanted a sauce bar. No, a sauce. Yeah. Like the appetizer could just be like a wide array of sauces that got swapped out every week, so that there was like some fun stuff. Like you could have like a Ray tea one week and like a hummus and yada 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 yada.
And you just dip your fingers in community style into that sauce, and then I don't see anything wrong. No. You could do like a vegetable or a pomme frite. Sounds good.
Or a drumstick, and you could just take the drumstick and dip it in, sample, and carry on. This is a strong concept.
I would like there to be a theater as well, like a screen so that there can be like cartoons playing in the background, Disney animated classics and stuff.
Of course.
Investors, I know that we have very wealthy, high net worth individuals listening to this podcast, and just get at us because we can make this happen. No big deal.
That sounds great.
What would you want to eat? CT versus, what is your favorite? Like, if you were going before a show and you only had a few minutes and you were like, oh, I'm really hungry, I didn't eat all day, I just want to nosh on something, what would you, like, love to have?
So, as a dog, I have found that I will eat almost anything except the other day, my human tried to give me some hummus, and no fucking thank you. I'm not down with hummus. I will eat a fucking random turd out of the yard before I eat hummus.
So what I'm hearing from this steering committee for the new venue restaurant is that we should offer turd.
As long as you have some sauces to sample with them.
Okay, I think that's perfect.
Okay.
For sure.
I love it. I'm envisioning, you know the movie Up when the dog has like the translator necklace?
Yes.
That's what's happening right now, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Right.
So, before I let you go, Addie, you were talking about Cragmask as an answer, and you were saying that might be pandering to me, which I think is funny because I joke about them so much, and I wanted to share this story with you because I have to share this story with somebody. Sometimes people will send me like random Cragmask stuff. Just out of the blue, like unsolicited. And the other night at 2:50 a.m., I got a random guy I've never talked to in my life. He sent me a video, and so I clicked accept, and I looked at it, and I was warned by Instagram that it may be obscene or contain sexual imagery. Which, if I'm getting a DM from a guy at 2:50 a.m., that's kind of implied. I get it.
Sure. Yeah.
But I opened it up, and there's this dude who has the first track of Cragmask playing in the background, and right as the drop hits, he bends over and rips open his pants to expose his bare ass, and then starts dancing.
I mean, I get that urge every time I listen to Cragmask. Like, I understand that expression of emotion when it hits. I get it.
That sounds like Crag unmasked.
Crackmask.
Well, one thing I will say before we end this really fun, lovely interview, I want to send you like a dog snack bouquet for your snacking needs.
Okay.
But one thing I'll say is that it's been a little tricky to come up with like fun, cute little nicknames for the band because I made up the moniker Danny Probably when I was like 17. I'm 32. So that was a long time ago. And we couldn't call it DPs. We always
Why not?
think about what we could possibly call things. I personally thought about changing the name of the project, but I think, I would have to weigh it a little bit. Maybe like Probs. That's a terrible name.
No, I like that.
But all I will say,
I like that.
Yeah, Probs. All I will say is like for other musicians out there who are just getting started, who want to actually like go somewhere really with their music, like don't be very thoughtful about what your acronym will be because our hands are tied.
Relax. I like it. You're Danny on Probably is what I always say.
I want it to be Addie Probably.
No, thank you.
All right.
I don't write. I'm not the songwriting machine you are. I would be like, well, band's over. I don't have anything else. So.
No, we can drop the charade and let everyone know that you write the song. But that's okay. All right.
Is there anything that you wanted to add before we cut?
The only thing I want to add is that everybody who likes Danny Probably and also people who really don't like Danny Probably should listen to Addie's solo stuff because when I heard Addie perform solo for the first time, I think I went home and told my boyfriend who's in the write-offs, also listen to this, I went home and I told my boyfriend, like, it's only a matter of time before Addie realizes that he's way better than I am and he's going to just take that show on the road. So honestly, Addie's solo stuff is phenomenal and literally really, 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 really good.
Keep your ear to the ground. November 14th, there will be, people ask all the time after we play, a show, like, can we hear anything? And we'll be like, yeah, we have one song. And there will be 7 songs all together with this new EP.
Wow.
And maybe 8 if we decide to release this other one. So, like, there'll be a lot more to listen to. And so November 14th. And show is with Fiction Kids at State House.
And Spit Take.
Do you want to know what it's called? Do you want to know what the record's called?
Yeah, I didn't know if you had settled on a name. I would love to know.
Oh, yeah, we have a name and everything. Should we say it? I think we can say it.
Yeah. So here's what we're gonna do.
This is gonna be the
Versus
week
exclusive.
At the very beginning. At the very beginning, I'm going to tell listeners all right, we're gonna have a reveal. You have to listen all the way through to hear it.
Yeah.
So
that tease. That's right.
No, people will hate us for that. But no, it's gonna be called Conditional Things.
Conditional Things.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Respect. What would you do if we were going to call it ctverses?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
I'll be your lawyer. You should sue if anyone calls it CTverses.
I will keep that in mind.
Conditional things, and it's like a physics thing. So, scientists will love it.
It also just sounds good as a record title, I think, is basically what we landed on. But
that's accurate.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you have a great day. I hope that you get to go run in a yard today and eat something other than hummus.
I will see if there are any turds out there with my name on it.
Yeah, best of luck.
All
right,
y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. That was Dan Capalbo and Addie Edward of Danny Probably. Keep an eye on their Bandcamp page or Spotify page for Conditional Things. That is their EP that we talked about in this interview is set to come out on November 14th. But also, if you haven't done it already, go ahead and check out the Danny Probably Bandcamp page. There's lots of really cool early recordings and demos and live cuts that you can find there. And you can also find Addie's solo stuff on Spotify and Bandcamp as well. Particularly, go ahead and take a listen to Picture of Youth. We talked about some of that music in this interview. I think you are really going to love it. If you haven't got a chance to see Danny Probably live, definitely absolutely take that opportunity if you can. And in fact, I think you should come celebrate the release of Conditional Things with us on November 14th. That is going to be at the State House in New Haven. It's also going to be the release show for Fiction Kids' new record, and Spit Take is going to be there too. So it's going to be an awesome night. And if you are listening to this in the future and you're thinking November 14th has already passed, I'm sorry. I did everything I could to warn you and let you know about it. And that's what you get for not listening or not following me on Instagram. So I'm going to play us out with some of Suffering, the band's first single. See you later. Bye.